This isn't about a new setup. This is about the psychological mismatch destroying you from the inside. If you're tired of sabotaging your own trades, listen closely. The majority of traders don't discuss their true beginnings. They discuss their victories. They keep their losses to themselves. They discuss the large transactions, the flawless entry, and the screenshots they post online. However, because the beginning is embarrassing, they don't discuss it. You stumbled into trading rather than entering it with a plan and discipline. Perhaps through a widely shared video showing someone earning thousands of dollars in 10 minutes. Perhaps through a friend who couldn't stop talking about cryptocurrency. Perhaps in a desperate attempt to get out of a job you detested. Perhaps out of boredom. Perhaps by imagining that you could outwit a system that billions of people use on a daily basis. You carried the same elements, regardless of how you got there. Hope, a sense of urgency, and the risky conviction that you might learn this quickly. The trap is that, because trade does provide freedom, but only to those who make it through the 95% fatality rate. You've most likely already paid the initiation fee if you're listening to this. An account has been blown by you. Perhaps a few. Perhaps more than you'll acknowledge. That's typical. That is to be expected. However, no one tells you this. The change isn't blowing accounts. Later on, the true turning point occurs. It's also far harsher than losing money. Every trader experiences a period of inactivity. They're making assumptions, responding, hoping, pushing buttons, and labeling it as progress. You make up a narrative for yourself following your initial setbacks. All I need is a more effective plan. All I need is additional information. Cleaner entries are all I need. Thus, you begin to study, and learning soon turns into an obsession. You begin simply RSI, resistance, support, and moving averages. Then you are drawn farther into the rabbit hole. Order blocks, Elliott waves, ICT, WOF, Fibonacci extensions, volume profiles, algorithmic footprints, and smart money principles. You tell yourself that because you know more, you're getting better. You are able to describe intricate configurations. You can instruct people on the appearance of a liquidity grab. However, there has been no change in your behavior. When the price approaches, you still move your stop. After a defeat, you still engage in vengeance trading. You don't want to miss it, so you still arrive early. Because you are afraid of returning the profit, you continue to leave early. Technical intelligence grows, but emotional literacy does not. You are destroyed by this mismatch because you know better in your heart. You still don't improve, though. You are devoured by that contradiction. Of course, you were unaware at first. You believed that mastering the proper technique would suffice. You didn't know about the mental difficulties and the dark side of this work. You've now realized that it's not as simple as it seems, and you've witnessed the cost of achieving the level you've always wanted. You're not a novice anymore. You no longer have no idea. You've spent countless hours studying. Even after thousands of minutes of observing price movements, you remain inconsistent. You're no longer producing money, but you're also not blowing up. You're trapped. Not a successful trader, but not a losing one. You've spent thousands of minutes observing price movements, yet you're still inconsistent. You're no longer blowing up, but you're also losing money. You're stuck. Not a profitable trader, but not a losing one either. Caught between two different identities. Additionally, this is the most mentally taxing aspect of trading. Purgatory is what it is. Most folks give up there. It's incredibly difficult to get out of here. The majority of people experience this stage because the solution is no longer readily apparent. Not because they are foolish or because the market is manipulated. If knowledge was the issue, then more knowledge would solve it. However, you've previously attempted that and it was unsuccessful. You now feel disoriented, perplexed, and worn out. And, worst of all, you begin to doubt yourself. Am I simply not intelligent enough? Do others possess something that I do not? Can I even do this? And that silent, deadly inquiry begins to drain you from the inside out. You must hear this truth. You're not failing because you're not capable. You're failing because you're attempting to solve a psychological issue with methods. And you can't fix your thinking with strategies. There is no way to get out of fear. Greed cannot be overcome by backtesting. You cannot get over your impatience by watching videos on YouTube. You don't have to deal with the market. You are. And nothing changes until you're prepared to confront that. You have to own up to your mistakes. There is no other method to find a solution. If not, it's a dark finish. Even though you lost money, you persevered in spite of everything, including the psychological challenges, high levels of stress, and effort you put in. And you ended up somewhere unexpected on the route. You eventually reach your breaking point. Furthermore, it doesn't make an announcement. It ambushes you. Initially, losing money is merely bothersome and frustrating, something you think may be resolved with another video or strategy adjustment. However, the losses begin to feel different after enough time. They shift their focus from your account to something more profound, your self-assurance, identity, and value. A lost trade ceases to be a trade. It turns into a declaration. I might not be suited for this. I might not have what it takes. The market ceases to be a game at this point and turns into a brutally honest mirror. And everything you've been neglecting is reflected back. Your lack of self-control, your impatience, your desire to win quickly rather than correctly, and your demand for certainty in a world that provides none. The hardest aspect is that you are no longer able to hide. You have to confront yourself. Additionally, this is really uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable that we consider giving up trade here rather than confronting it and advancing, because it's difficult to deal with some things this deeply on a regular basis. However, something fascinating occurs if you are able to continue in spite of this. It normally follows a sequence that you are all too familiar with. For a while, you stick to your plan. You think you're finally getting it. Then a single losing streak occurs. Not a little one, but one that feels targeted and personal, as if the market is keeping a close eye on you. Everything seems to be part of a plot to undermine you. It's as though the market is specifically working against you because it knows you so well, and regrettably, you tilt. To get better, you need to make one more transaction, then another, and so on. You stop abiding by your rules at some point along the spiral. You cease to think. We stop using reason and begin using our primal impulses to make more decisions. Your system is no longer being traded. You're exchanging your fear. You're being driven by your emotions. When you eventually shut down the laptop, you look at the screen and murmur something worse, disappointment, because you knew better. You still went ahead and did it. Honestly, you have no idea how frequently you're doing this. Additionally, each time you say, next time will be different. However, it isn't. By now, you may be tired of the circumstances. The actual suffering begins at this point. You no longer doubt your approach. You begin to doubt yourself. Why do I act contrary to my moral convictions? Why am I able to explain discipline to others but not practice it myself? You start to feel like two different persons. The person who is aware of what has to be done and the person who declines to do it. Furthermore, their conflict is not silent. It's never ending and draining. A silent war. A conflict that is invisible. A conflict in which the victim and the enemy are the same individual. This is a mentally taxing war that is extremely difficult to escape. We must defeat ourselves, not the markets, if we are to succeed. And the hardest battle is the one has with oneself. However, a pivotal moment may occur. A blown account is the tipping point for some traders. For others, it means losing money that they cannot afford. Savings, borrowed money, and rent money. Some people don't even care about the money. It's running out. Exhaustion of emotions. The cycle of effort, collapse, shame, and hope. It's very dark. Every trader eventually comes to the same query. Is it worthwhile to do this? Is it really worth experiencing all of this? Is torturing myself worth it? We ask ourselves truthfully, when we began this, we couldn't have predicted the darkness we now face. Most leave at that precise moment. It's not because they are not intelligent enough or that trading is too difficult, but rather that they've never learned to accept themselves. Because it's more difficult to face your shortcomings than to lose money. Because any possible benefit seemed insignificant compared to the emotional expense. Indeed, it's not that simple. You can tell someone is lying if they claim that trading is simple. One of the most difficult jobs with the greatest mental strain in the world is trading. However, you are unable to convey this to others. You have to handle everything by yourself. Here's the conundrum, though. You're closer to success than you realize if you're reading this right now, and this game has broken, humiliated, and brought you to your knees. Why? Because illusions perish at the breaking point. The delusion that results are under your control. In actuality, you're at your most open to change. The delusion that you can be saved by a single ideal tactic. The delusion that the interior effort can be neglected. Your ego breaks at this point, and there's room for anything genuine in that crack. Structure, patience, humility, and discipline. Without this breakdown, you cannot become consistent. It cannot be skipped. It cannot be outsourced. The encounter with yourself is inevitable. The end is not at the breaking point. It's just the start. You cannot pay money to get here. You can't arrive here fast. Living through all of this is the only way to get here, and congrats if you've made it this far. The invisible threshold is this: every successful trader crosses. You never trade in the same manner again after you cross it. Because you finally get it now. The smartest, fastest, or most self-assured people do not always succeed. The people that survive themselves own it. To individuals who possess self-control and are not emotionally enslaved, to those who avoid the pitfalls they build for themselves. Then, if you're among the few who don't give up, something changes. Snorts. The sound ceases. It's not because losses vanish or the market becomes easier, but rather because something within you shifts. You give up chasing. You no longer want to know how I can win more. And you begin posing a different query. Why do I continue to undermine myself? The true turning point is that, because your focus shifts within for the first time, away from indicators, patterns, and tactics, you begin to see what was previously invisible. Your poor plan did not cause you to blow accounts. You lost them because you were unable to quit trading at the appropriate time. It wasn't ignorance that caused you to fail. You didn't allow your edge enough time to work, which is why you failed. The unfairness of the market did not lead you to lose. Because you were emotional rather than mechanical, you lost. And the truth emerges gradually and cruelly. Trading is not an intelligence test. It's a self-control test. Additionally, the person who does not pass this test will lose money. When someone lacks self-control, even the best strategy in the world is useless. With that, they will unavoidably lose money. They will undoubtedly blow their accounts. Your responses did. The change starts when this is evident. You no longer take setbacks personally. Every trade is no longer necessary for you to succeed. You give up attempting to guess what will happen next. Instead of chasing because it seems appropriate, you begin to recognize trading as a process. You develop procedures and guidelines to effectively oversee this process, not to generate revenue. However, it is the dilemma. Making more money is inevitable if you prioritize self-control before financial gain. You no longer say, I hope this works, and you begin to say, I take it if it fits my rules. I don't if it doesn't. How do I avoid losing is no longer a question you ask. How do I execute consistently, you ask. Emotional peaks and valleys even out. The euphoria of winning fades. Losing ceases to be devastating. You begin to rely more on likelihood than on emotion. Process is more important than instinct. Additionally, you experience something that traders hardly ever experience in the early stages of their adventure for the first time. Control over yourself, not the market. And the most valuable item is this. In reality, everything is under the authority of the person in charge. The markets are beyond our control. That is not feasible. However, we can alter everything if we have self-control. This is the aha moment. It's not a secret indicator, a strategic disclosure, or a trend that the experts don't want you to know. This is the aha moment. Perfection is not the goal of consistency. It involves patience, neutrality, repetition, and predictability. It's the subtle insight that you've been engaged in the wrong kind of conflict. It was not intended for you to outperform the market. You were meant to become an expert on yourself. And everything shifts when that happens. You give up trying to find a magic wand. You recognize the futility of switching between strategies. You can now act in accordance with your awareness of the true issue. You give up on attempting to improve as a trader each week. Every day you improve as a trader. You remove anything that is superfluous. All of the indications are made simpler. In reality, you don't employ every tactic. You keep flipping between all the sounds. You select a single strategy instead of guidelines. For the first time, you're determined to learn it rather than replace it. You establish structure, a pre-trading routine, precise entry and exit guidelines, a maximum number of trades per day, a set risk per trade, and a weekly review procedure. It's not because someone instructed you to, but rather because you've finally realized that discipline is impossible without structure. You establish structure, a pre-trading routine, precise entry and exit guidelines, a maximum number of trades per day, a set risk per trade, and a weekly review procedure. It's not because someone instructed you to, but rather because you finally realize that discipline is impossible without structure. Additionally, you now realize how unproductive it is to spend time staring at charts. You have a different perspective on trading. Any day you are able to maintain self-control is sufficient for productivity. You quit trading when you're upset regardless of whether you profit or lose. After a victory, you cease growing larger. You give up using violence to make up for losses. You give up on the idea that the next trade will make things right. Every choice begins with intention rather than reaction. You begin journaling not to keep track of transactions, but to keep track of yourself, including what prompted the entry, how you felt before clicking, whether you adhered to the rules or not, how you responded when the price changed, why you left when you did, and what emotion, fear, greed, impatience, or hesitation was motivating you. Your journal gradually transforms from a record of exchanges to one of transformation. Behavior is where patterns appear, not charts. You begin to identify the precise instant when the urge attempts to take over your thoughts. And when it occurs, you take a new action. You stop, take a deep breath, and wait for your discipline to catch up rather than the market. You become aware of the times when you are most likely to make mistakes, and you learn to stop before they happen. You now understand that the market does not flee and that even before charts, the most crucial thing you can do as a trader is to direct yourself. As a result, you make fewer mistakes over time and make wise choices. When you make the right choices, momentum begins to work in your favor. You are now patient rather than rushing. There is less tension in your life. On the one hand, you feel like you're working harder and having more success, but on the other, you're earning more money. Everything becomes commonplace and normalized with time, and now it comes naturally to you to be a reliable trader. Let's get back to the procedure. Progress is redefined by you. You don't get excited when you win. You are not destroyed by loss. Did I follow my process? That's the only question that matters, because you now know something that most traders do not. A successful trade that is poorly executed results in a loss. A lost deal that is completed flawlessly is a victory. Your identity changes. Success is no longer based on results. It has to do with behavior. You turn into the trader who uses execution rather than sentiment to gauge consistency. Then, subtly but unmistakably, things begin to shift. Your losses decrease. Your winnings are cleaned up. Your equity curve becomes stable. Your self-assurance grows stronger but quieter. It no longer feels like gambling to trade. It begins to feel like labor. Labor that is repetitive, organized, and predictable. Additionally, the more self-control you have, the more things go your way. What was once tumultuous is now peaceful. What was once intimate now seems impersonal. What was once unachievable now seems doable. You give up hunting transactions because you have faith that they will return. Risk is pre-accepted, so you no longer worry about losing money. You finally realize that expertise takes time, so you stop hurrying. At that point, the actual change takes place. You give up on making money. You begin to establish consistency. Since profitability is not an objective, it's an unintended byproduct of time, process, emotional control, and discipline. The majority of traders never get to this point. They must confront their shortcomings, sit with them, and start over. Furthermore, this is not a simple task. You can truly accomplish this if you've made it this far. It's not simple. We are all well aware of that. You're not alone, even though it doesn't appear that way from the outside. You're becoming more than just a successful dealer. You're developing and changing as a person, so don't worry. Because trading also helps you grow intellectually. You gain more from it than you thought. However, none of this is simple. But in spite of everything, you persisted. Congratulate yourself. This is something you deserve. You made the decision to perform a really challenging task that you believed to be simple. And you persevered and made it this far. Most people could not withstand the darkness you experienced. Compared to your previous life, your stress levels have significantly grown. You gave up your finances, your well-being, and your mental state. However, you've changed since then. You also know what you need and what you don't. You succeeded in spite of everything. You broke. You gained knowledge. You rebuilt. Not your plan, your thoughts. And now, gradually but surely, you're turning into the trader you once believed was unattainable. The merchant who is not dependent on hope. And you've come this far because you persisted. The darkness you encountered was too much for most people to bear. Your stress levels have increased dramatically in comparison to your former life. You sacrificed your money, your health, and your mental health, but since then, you've evolved. You are also aware of what you require and what you do not. Despite everything, you were successful. You broke. You learned new things. You rebuilt. It's not your plan, your ideas. And now, slowly but surely, you are becoming the trader you once thought was impossible. The merchant who doesn't rely on hope.